Welcome to this presentation of our master program in Bioinformatics and Computational Biology. As Remy said, my name is Daniel Wegmann. I'm a professor in computational biology at the University of Fribourg. This is a joint program between our two universities. So Remy and I are going to give this presentation somewhat together. And we are both here to answer your questions. The information is pretty much identical regardless of at which university you are subscribed to this program, and that's very much our goal. So we want to make this as easy and smooth for you regardless of where you're from. So before I start, I just want to briefly introduce the question what bioinformatics actually is. So there's maybe different definitions of bioinformatics. When I studied myself biology, one common way of defining bioinformatics was basically whenever your data sets are too large to use Excel, you need a bioinformatician. I'd like to kind of think of bioinformatics as something even broader. I think the goal of bioinformatics is actually to make use of the big data revolution we are going through. So there's the large amounts of data sets that are currently accumulated in the life sciences, as well, of course, in other fields, but particularly in the life sciences, and turn those into some really spectacular insights about life, about where we come from, or simply about how human bodies or other organisms function. And so basically bioinformatics is the way to turn big data into these spectacular insights. The way bioinformatics contributes to this is through basically three things. Bioinformatics combines clever models, so that is models that we develop that allow us to grasp and understand or describe a particular phenomenon in nature. We then implement and develop fast algorithms to learn parameters of these models. So we write fast computer code, and we harvest the powerful resources that modern computers offer. Of course, computational power is ever increasing, but we're living in an area in which, or in a time during which, the big data revolution is even faster. So we are accumulating more data at a much faster pace than computers are getting faster, which is why using clever models and fast code is not something old-fashioned, but it's actually becoming ever more important during these times. And whenever you want to study or become a bioinformatician, so in our program, we want to teach you basically all these concepts. We want to teach you enough about biology, about life science, that you understand the real challenges and you understand what kind of questions are important and how to address them. We want to teach you enough about high throughput technology so you know how that big data, how the current data is generated. But most and foremost, we want to teach you how you can build clever models yourself, how you can implement algorithms or make use of existing algorithms to learn under these models, and then how to harvest or how to harness the computation power given to you by high performance computing centers. So this is really what bioinformaticians do in their daily life, and we want to have a program for you that covers exactly these aspects. Now, you might wonder, what is actually big data in the life sciences really? So what am I talking about here? The breadth of kind of high throughput methods and their applications is so large that it's impossible now to give you a complete overview. But what we want to kind of illustrate to you at this stage is that first, high throughput technology, so big data, now really touches every aspect of the life sciences, and all those aspects that are currently only marginally affected probably will be heavily affected in the near future. So big data on high throughput methods is something that is paramount in the life sciences, ranging from genomics to conservation biology. So ranging from understanding the genetic mechanisms of diseases to actually conserving biodiversity on this planet. In between is a lot of other aspects that are important to us in this program, which is medicine and public health as another major pillar. And I just put here also imaging to just say it's all not all about genetics. There's other stuff in there too. But what I'm now going to do is I give you just some specific examples to each of those to give you kind of an idea of what kind of big data and problems we're talking about. But these are really just examples, and they're just picked for illustration purposes. So let's focus on genomics as an example. For instance, with the latest technologies in sequencing, we can now understand the human genome in much more detail. And we have an opportunity to sequence pretty much every person on the planet and even to extract DNA from ancient bones and study ancient DNA and answer questions such as what makes us humans? So what kind of mutations differentiate us from our closest relatives? Which kind of mutations give rise to the fascinating differences and diversity that makes up humanity as a whole? We can use sequencing technologies also to learn more about the functioning of individual cells. For instance, using RNA sequencing, so sequencing the mRNA in cells, we might ask, so which genes are actually currently activated in a cell? And therefore also ask if a cell changes its function or if external factors affect the cell. How does the cell react through this by changing which genes are activating? And that's something we can quantify and measure. But we don't only have to work on single species. And one of the major interesting applications of genomics these days is so-called metagenomics, where we're trying to understand actually a pool of organisms together by sequencing. One such question would be, which microorganisms inhabit our gut? So we have lots of different bacteria and other organisms living in our gut. And they are so small and they're hard to study individually. I cannot really plate them in the lab. But what we can do is we can sequence all the DNA we find in the gut, or a sample of that DNA, and deduce what kind of organisms are present and in what kind of proportions. And I want to give you some examples about imaging, just to show like kind of a completely different aspect of bioinformatics that doesn't deal with sequencing, but with other ways of high throughput methods. One of these major high throughput methods we're seeing emerging at this moment is microscopy. So microscopy is traditionally something where a person sits in front of a microscope for hours and hours and tries to see or discover particular structures and drawing them. But we see currently a revolution in this, in the sense of that microscopy is being automated. It's being automated in ways that allows us for a microscope to generate particular pictures automatically. For instance, an entire 3D scan where for many different layers, we automatically take a picture of a particular tissue. And we can then use computers to actually stitch together the information from these individual slides to create a 3D visual of that particular tissue and ask questions such as which neurons are actually connected. We can follow individual neurons, their axons, their dendrites to figure out to which other neuron each of those is connected using imaging. Of course, images is not only still images, but it's also videos, so animated images. We see a revolution currently in our ability to automatically analyze video sequences. This revolutionizes the way, for instance, to study behavior. So we can take videos of organisms through their day and just ask, how does their behavior change? We can quantify automatically the behavior using machine learning techniques and try to understand more about what factors shapes behavior of mice or of humans or other organisms. And now transition to medicine, to just say in medicine, there's also a major revolution on the way that is usually termed precision medicine or personalized medicine. Obviously, medicine has always been somewhat personal because if you go to a doctor, you have your personal issue. However, many of the treatments currently administered are really based on just cohorts, right? If you have a particular disease, we give this particular drug. However, we all differ. There's a lot of diversity between humans. And so it might well be that for a particular disease, some people should rather be given a particular drug and other people should be given a different drug. The question is just how to figure this out. Now, one way to figure this out is to actually use different high throughput technologies to kind of like characterize a human body in full before making a decision just based on some symptoms. That includes genetics, to ask like what kind of like for what diseases are we carriers or for which diseases are we predisposed. When we talk about cancer, we might just ask, so which kind of mutations are causing that particular type of cancer? Because if we understand the mutational pathway that led to this particular tumor, we might be better suited in picking appropriate treatment. And of course, this is an area currently where we try to use a lot of artificial intelligence to speed up the discovery or the diagnosis in hospitals, but also elsewhere. So can we actually try to automatically diagnose certain diseases just based on measured parameters? Can you just send in a drop of blood and then based on this, like an app would actually just tell you, oh, you should see a doctor because you're likely developing this symptom? Like this is all in its infancy, but you can see how bioinformatics is going to make kind of a huge contribution in this field in the future. Public health is another area, and I think at the moment, we're all talking about COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and obviously bioinformatics is a way to try to shed light on how, for instance, the coronavirus is spreading. We can use mobility data. We can use data on just like the spreading, and try to understand spread patterns, like what kind of measurements might be helpful, which ones might not. But public health is much more than just a pandemic crisis. And public health, we're really asking what kind of like risk factors are there? What kind of factors shape the risk for us to develop a particular disease? So we want to try to link, say, behavior or choices people take in their lives towards their risk of developing a particular disease. And that these are becoming larger and larger data sets that need specific ways to be analyzed and treated. And finally, on a completely different end of the spectrum of what bioinformatics does, bioinformatics is currently supporting nature conservation and the conservation of biodiversity in many aspects. Just giving you basically two, again, like quite different examples. One is the use of artificial intelligence to understand biodiversity through camera trapping. Camera trapping are cameras with a motion detector that you put somewhere in the field, and whenever an individual passes and something moves in front, it takes a picture. So we can easily get millions and millions of pictures from an area, and then we can sift through those pictures to figure out what kind of species are present, in which numbers. We can try to see if of 1 year compared to the previous year, a particular species is increasing or decreasing in its number. But that's extremely laborious if you have to do all these analyses by hand. Now, artificial intelligence allows us here to actually identify these species increasingly automatically, but then also to have like clever models that take into account the mistakes that artificial intelligence is making in downstream analyses. And then again, another example for conservation biology would be DNA sequencing, because we can use DNA sequences of confiscated material to deduce its origin. So for instance, if we confiscate, or ivory is confiscated somewhere, we might ask the question, so where was that elephant killed that actually grew that tooth that was harvested? Okay, so as you can see, bioinformatics is really touching on every aspect of the life sciences by contributing clever models, code, as well as using computers to solve outstanding questions that can now be answered thanks to the big data that is collected in all these fields. Now, hopefully you now think like, well, bioinformatics is really cool because you guys do kind of everything, and that's true. We kind of do everything at the same time. Of course, we are not experts in all of these fields, but what we are experts in is understanding how you can turn data into insight. And that expertise is helpful in almost all aspects of the life sciences. Now, the question is, how do you actually become a bioinformatician? Okay, and this is what we want to answer you now. So basically, the way we designed this program is as follows. It consists of two major steps. I assume most of you have completed step one, which is obtaining a bachelor degree in basically any of the fields listed here or a similar field. We designed this program specifically to be open to students with a diverse background. So we accept students that study biology, biochemistry, biomedicine, life sciences, any kind of topic like this. But we also accept students that have a background in, say, computer science, statistics, mathematics, or even physics. And the reason is that bioinformatics is really what bridges these two fields. So we want students that have these different types of background and bring their different expertise together, because we can all benefit from having expertise in the cohort of students from these fields. Now, obviously, if you study biology, for instance, you might not be an expert programmer. Or if you study computer science, you might actually never heard of DNA before, or DNA sequencing. Now, we are fully aware of that, which is why the step two, the program that we actually offer, is trying as a first step to kind of teach you the kind of things you're lacking in your training. So the basic idea is, if you come with a background in biology, biochemistry, or biomedicine, you will get a crash course in coding, in a crash course in using computers. If you come more with computer science and the statistics background, you will get a crash course in biology. So what are the major topics in biology, the major structures, the major methods? Now, clearly, these 15 ECTS of crash courses, they don't turn a biologist into a statistician or computer scientist, and they don't turn a mathematician into a biologist. But that's not even the idea of the program. The idea of the program is that you acquire in these first steps sufficient knowledge and sufficient terminology of the other field that you can start talking to these people. As a biologist, you might want to know enough coding that you can crank up your kind of like simple model yourself. And if it's too slow, you might have all the terminology and knowledge to talk to a computer scientist to understand how to improve it. Vice versa, a computer scientist might have just enough biology to understand the problem of a biologist, so he or she can help the biologist to actually solve the problem. But of course, without necessarily having all the knowledge of a biologist. In fact, bioinformatics is never the idea of knowing everything. We are facilitators that allow biologists to kind of like solve their problems. So we need to understand enough biology to understand the problem, enough statistics and coding to propose a solution, but we can always reach out to experts in the respective fields. Once we have established this kind of common terminology and understanding of the different fields, like we have then a 75 ECTS block of dedicated courses in bioinformatics. And I really want to point this out here because we are not the only program in bioinformatics, but most bioinformatics programs that exist out there, what they do is they basically combine lectures that were designed for biology masters and lectures that were designed for informatics masters and just put them together and say, well, that's bioinformatics. We took a very different approach to this. We said bioinformatics is a field on its own, and we tried to think out what kind of courses and what kind of training does a bioinformatician really need. And then we designed the courses accordingly. So the vast majority of our courses are actually specific to that program. Okay, and I'm going to give you more details about those on the next slide. You're going to then terminate this master program with a master's thesis. This master's thesis is 30 ECTS, so that's shorter than some other programs. There are some programs that have a 60 ECTS thesis. Again, we do this on purpose. The reason is that we believe that as a bioinformatician, there's so many things you need to learn that we need to have more courses. So we have 90 ECTS of courses in total and only 30 ECTS of thesis. But we also believe that most of the things you learn during a thesis, you can actually learn in 30 ECTS. And even though some more fascinating projects would require more than 30 ECTS for the thesis, they usually are of more benefit to the project than actually to the student when it comes to learning skills. So this is why this program was designed specifically to give more, or to put more effort, or to put more weight on the courses than the thesis. Now, I promised you a bit more detail on those bioinformatics courses that we designed, okay? But before I turn there, here's just a basic question of whether this whole setup actually works. So what we did is, what I told you is, we accept students with very different backgrounds, and we try to kind of turn them into half computer scientists and half biologists, so that we complement their knowledge in a way that they can all talk together. So does this thing work? Now, this program is by now 7 years old, and after 5 years, we had a major survey of all previous students just to figure kind of out where we're good at and where we're not so good at. And so in this new 120 ECTS program, we took a lot of the criticisms these students had into account in redesigning the program to make it even stronger. But even in those in the first 5 years, we got really interesting feedback from the students that I would like to share. So on the left here, what you see is kind of like a roundup of what the backgrounds of our students are. You can see that almost 60% of our students have a bachelor in biology or related fields. Okay, so this is clearly the majority. However, they are far from only biologists. There's about 10% of the people that have a computer science background, another almost 10% that have math, another almost 10% physics. So together, they're more than computer science. And then interestingly, we have even 20% of students that say none of these things is an exact match to the bachelor. So you see, our cohort of students is extremely diverse. Okay, but despite their training being diverse, when we then ask them whether they actually had the right background to study this program, this is on the right, we got these answers. In fact, we ask a negative question. We ask, I was lacking the right background for this program. Is this true or not? And you see that the vast majority of our students say they actually disagree with this, suggesting that they think they have the right background. Okay, so clearly we offer the right background in this program for students that are very diverse in what they bring with them. So we think this idea of having these first kind of modules where we complement your knowledge is actually paying out, is working for the students. And we have a program that they would all say actually is well designed for them, despite their diverse background that they have. Now, as promised, a rundown of the different topics that we have in our specific bioinformatics lectures. Okay, so here's just a long list of courses, and I'm going to go through them a little bit more detail to give you more, but just this is to inspire you to see we really try to touch on a lot of like the statistical and computational aspects, as well as the biology that is relevant for where bioinformatics plays a role. We group these lectures in a bunch of modules. A fourth module is a module we call coding. So there's a lot of computer science. So there's a lot of coding that we try to teach you. We do this with different courses, such as we give you an introduction to Linux and Bash, to Python, but also to R. And then we show you how you can actually program or code in a sustainable way. So we show you the use of repositories, open source, all these questions. But then also we show you how you can make use of your coding skills in kind of like the different types of analysis we do. So we focus on bioinformatic algorithms as a major lecture, as well as image processing, because we think that images are becoming increasingly important. And of course, we also have a course on HPC and cloud computing, because that's also something that is extremely important, where HPC here stands for high performance computing. So the question is, how can you use these large computational resources out there? Once you have some understanding of coding, we want to complement that with a more in-depth understanding of data science or statistics. So here we have lectures in applied biostatistics or stochastic modeling, but also machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, so that we can try to give you really the skill set that you need in order to work with big data and as data scientists. And I would like to point out here that both the coding skills as well as the data science and statistics skills, they're also completely transferable. Right? Should you do this bioinformatics master, but then decide not to work in bioinformatics, but in another field of data science, then that's totally possible, because we really train you first and foremost as data scientists. And then on top of that, we're going to add all the stuff that is specific to the fields of the life sciences. In those, a major focus is on genomics and transcriptomics, because to date, still most of the big data generated is sequencing data. Now, this is probably going to change in the future, but at this stage, it is still the dominant kind of technology used in big data generation, which is why we have a whole package on genomics and transcriptomics, starting with an introduction to next generation sequencing, so all the current technologies out there, but then how you can use those in different fields. To study evolutionary systems in evolutionary genomics, to understand that genetic data has a history of its own that usually we need to take into account. We want to study transcriptomics, so RNA sequencing and single-cell transcriptomics to understand gene expression and gene regulation. We have a class of metagenomics and metatranscriptomics to understand how multiple organisms build communities, such, for instance, as the microorganisms in our gut. We have a whole lecture on cancer genomics, because that's increasingly important in precision medicine to really, as I laid out before, understand the specific mutations that underlie a particular tumor in order to improve treatment. And finally, we're going to have courses on genome assembly and annotation, which is also with the current initiatives in trying to get a genome for basically all organisms out there, something where there's a lot of hands required and a lot of knowledge, gathered. Finally, we add some additional topics on there in another module that we call kind of specialized bioinformatics, where we try to give you all the bioinformatics applications and knowledge needed that is not in the genomics and transcriptomics field. Okay, so here we have a block on proteomics and metabolomics. So they use mass spectrometry as the source of data generation. Systems biology, which really understanding whole organisms or entire cells using different type of omics approaches. We have a research seminar where every year we invite different people in the Swiss and broader Swiss community working in bioinformatics to share with you their latest discoveries. We have a specific course on epidemiology, which we think is particularly relevant during these times, where we teach you how to actually understand pandemics and how to understand the spread of viruses from a data science perspective. And finally, we have a big chunk on precision medicine, which is where we believe future jobs are particularly common. So with these different modules, we really feel we cover the breadth of bioinformatics in a way that we trim your feet for future both jobs as well as potentially a pursuit of a PhD. So what do our students think? Again, this is based on the first 5 years, and I should say here that we try to improve our program further based on the criticisms of those students. But despite that, the students were actually extremely happy with the program already. So here are 2 questions that I think are very important to discuss. The first one on the left is we ask the student whether this program was difficult. And what you can see is a majority would say it's at least neutral or rather difficult. There's very few students that would say, no, that's not difficult at all, or that's super easy, right? So in total, it's more than 80% of the students that said it's average or difficult, okay? And we are very much aware of this. So the bioinformatics program is not designed to be an easy program. It is a rather difficult program. However, we are really trying to support the students in obtaining those skills. And I think that is reflected in the question on the right, where we ask the student, the program was the right choice for me. And you see a vast majority here said, yes, it was. So 52% say absolutely true, and 33% would say, yes, that's true. So together making up 85% of our students that would say, yes, this is a difficult program, but it was the right program for me. And I think this is what we strive for. We would like to have a program that is difficult because we think what we teach is important and we want to teach you a lot of things, but we want to teach you these things in a way that after the program, our students would say, that was actually a good program, that was worth doing, right? And I think we achieved in that already after these 5 years, but based on the specific feedback we got from these students, the program that we are offering today is even better than this one, because we really try to address the specific things students told us. They, for instance, told us that they would need more programming and more statistics because these were difficult for them. So we added an extra course in programming and we added an extra course in statistics. And these are just 2 examples. So what happens for people that did that master or completed that master? What are the future possibilities for these students? First, I must say, this is still very hard to assess. Bioinformatics is a very young field. This program is now 6 years old. This is the 7th year we're doing this. There's a few other programs in Switzerland, but they're equally young. So I cannot tell you what someone does today that studied bioinformatics 20 years ago. In fact, most of our students finished their courses in the last few years. Nonetheless, we ask them what they're doing, and we try to kind of like figuring out kind of like their perspectives and their career choices. But before I go into that, I want to just say it is hard to imagine that bioinformatics will not be important in the near future. The reason is that simply the data explosion we're seeing right now is still continuing to pick up speed. So all those high throughput technologies we see, they're getting even faster and faster, and people figure out how to make use of those in an ever increasingly diverse set of fields. Artificial intelligence is a perfect example of this. 10 years ago, it was a niche thing, but today everyone is talking about it, and we see all areas of the life sciences affected by the possibilities of deep learning. But deep learning is not the only technology out there. There's a lot of other machine learning technologies and a lot of other ways by which you can produce data that are going to make an impact in the future. So I think it's fair to say that that big data, the amount of data out there, is going to increase even further, probably even accumulating faster than it has in the past. So for us, it's clear that bioinformaticians will be in demand in the future. This is kind of definitely a growing field in the life sciences. If we ask now our students what they did after this master, something that we figured out was that 60% of our students actually pursue a PhD afterwards. So it seems that the majority of our students thinks like, yeah, bioinformatics is really cool, but I want to know more. I want to continue my studies in a particular field, acquire more skills. There are students that do a PhD specifically in bioinformatics, but there's also many that do a PhD in an applied field, mostly in the life sciences, but not uniquely, where they make use of their data scientist skills to actually work on a specific biological problem. And I think it's really these 2 uses of bioinformatics that we see. So people really focusing on the development of bioinformatics approaches, but also people that would take their bioinformatic knowledge and skill set to address a particular problem in the life sciences. However, there's also quite some jobs out there. The job market, if we look at our past students, involves definitely clinics and hospitals, where the data generation and precision medicine boom is kind of leading to more and more the requirement of people that make sense out of data, help sort it, and try to acquire it. So this is definitely something where there's a lot of jobs out there. We also see that some of our students join some pharmaceutical companies. But importantly here, the set of jobs that people do is extremely diverse. Even though these are the 2 most common types of jobs, they together make up only a small proportion of what our students do. And our students end up doing basically everything where there is data, right? So we have examples of students that work in a very, very diverse set of fields, because the skills that we try to teach them is really geared towards data science, preferably in the life science domain, but not only. And their skills, they can put them to use in a very diverse set of fields. And even though you read here clinics and pharmaceutical industry as the first 2 top points, I just want to stress that together they still make up a small proportion of what our students do. So we asked the students whether the program prepared them well for the job market and academia. Again, we got relatively positive feedback here. So for instance, only 13% would say they disagree with this. So 87% of all students would say there is either neutral or they think, yes, we prepared them well for the job market. It's a bit more extreme for the academic career, where there's even a larger share of students that think we prepared them well. Some of the requirements or some of the feedback we got from the students regarding the job market were a lack of precision medicine topics, which is why we made this a new focus in the new program now by adding a specific lecture on precision medicine, as well as giving increasing some other lecture that touch on this subject. So again, we hope that like whatever students felt was not preparing them extraordinarily for the job market, we could address with the new program that we're now offering. Okay, so this is the end of the presentation we prepared. I must say it is a bit weird for me to just talk to my own computer. I mean, I do this in teaching all the time, but the idea of this presentation is to excite you, but also to sort of to show you kind of what this program does. Now, it's hard to judge at this stage how excited you are, but I hope we kind of convinced you that bioinformatics is really a field of the future, and that we try in our program to really catch up with the fast developments in the field by making our program, by changing our program and adapting our program to the latest developments and latest technologies. And we believe so far we managed extremely well in this and try to and manage to kind of train students in a diverse set of skills that prepares them, I think, for a future career in the life sciences. And in the life sciences, the big data technologies are really spreading like crazy. And we believe, therefore, that there is lots of opportunities for data scientists in the life sciences, even in domains at which currently today they may be lacking. In the near future, there's likely going to be a need for these people. And so we think we really try very hard to provide the training and the skill and the expertise for students to master this and excel in these fields. Now, we're very open to questions. So whatever kind of questions you might have on the specific program or on the admission or whatever, we try to answer. Here with me is again Remy. So we're both here. We have a representative from Fribourg, me, but also one from Bern. So we can answer all questions specific to the universities as well. But I want to say here, this is truly a joint program, and Remy and I try extremely hard to make sure that you experience the exact same program and have the same chances, no matter where you register for it.